Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Frost & Sullivan's latest webinar from our mobility practice. Today's event is titled Electric Vehicle Outlook, Trends and Opportunities. My name is Anna, and I oversee Frost & Sullivan's Growth, Innovation, and Leadership briefings. Our presenters today are Kevin Kelly, Senior Consultant. Kevin has over 8 years of automotive experience, including leading OEMs within their strategies, advanced engineering, and research. Also joining them is Anjan Kumar, Research Manager. He has 12 years of automotive research and consulting experience and specializing in the electric vehicles, passenger cars, batteries, motors, charging infrastructure, and business models. And also joining us is Mark Fitzgerald, Director of our Automotive Consulting Practice. He has over 20 years of automotive industry research and consulting experience. And Mark specializes in the connected, autonomous, shared, and electrified technologies and business models. With that, I would now like to hand the presentation over to Kevin.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that lovely introduction. So today I'm going to be starting this presentation off a little bit with the fundamentals around powertrain and talking about the powertrain topic before Anjan takes over and discusses the EV side. So within Frost & Sullivan, we have our documentation of outlooks. So at the beginning of each year, we review back on what happened in the previous year and try and make some predictions and forecasts for the forthcoming year. So I want to kind of take you through 5 or 6 slides detailing sort of what we see happening in 2018 within the powertrain environment, and then moving forward in terms of future technologies and roadmaps. So to begin that, we must first start at what's driving the industry, what's driving the powertrain changes and evolution. And we see this slide shows 3 key markets where we're starting to see big transitions in the legislation and regulation environment, which is driving OEMs to new powertrain technologies and to electrification and EVs. So if we see on the left-hand side, we focus on the North American market in the USA and Canada with EPA Tier 3 and the California regulation Lev 3 as well. Both these regulations are pushing the US sector towards a low particle emissions and a low NOx environment, very different to what it is now, and this is requiring a big technology shift in the US. When we come over to the European environment, we have the big revolutionary change in regulation last year with the introduction of RDE and WLTP and a whole new certification methodology and process. And this going forward will change even more when we start introducing regulations on corporate emissions in 2020 and towards 2025, and also shift fully toward the WLTP environment. So these are changing how the OEMs test and giving them much more stringent regulations for testing their vehicles. So they're getting worse fuel consumption and CO2, and this is starting to be pushed on to the customer. But these fuel consumption measures are much more realistic, so it's pushing the OEM to start developing technologies for the real world and how this changes. And then in China, the last market I wanted to focus on today was their very big push towards new energy vehicles, so EVs, but also towards China 6, which is matching what is happening in the US and Europe. So you can see this is a legislation and regulation shift that's causing the industry to move. In 2018 and 2017 were big changes in this in terms of Europe introducing WLTP, the US detailing what's happening in these level 3 regulations. So that's the kind of drivers behind the industry of what's making these OEMs to look at new technologies, new powertrains, and having a shift in their industry. And what we then like to do at Frost is start with this big challenge at the top level of the regulation and break it down into the different technologies that we can see. So we start looking at the market outlook. So how are, based on 2018 and 2019 predictions, across all of these markets, which technologies are selling and in which proportion. So this graph here shows on the left-hand side 2018 figures that we have available through our databases. And we see that predominantly over the whole globe, 80% is still maintained as gasoline volume. with an 11 to 12% share in diesel. And the other different powertrains, whether that be mild hybrid, full hybrid, EV, and alternative fuels are also shown there. And we break this down across the key regions as well. We have the ones we've just discussed, US, Europe, and China, but also some other large markets and developing markets in such as Korea, Brazil, and India. So we start to track all of this, and we track all of this, and this is available within our Outlook that will be issued in the coming weeks onto our iFrost platform. And then with this, we make some predictions towards 2019 based on our understanding of how the industry is shifting, how the customer perception is shifting, and we see this strong increase in EV and a strong interest in general electrification. And obviously, Anjan later on will detail more the EV side and the strategies behind the EV side. But I myself focus on the powertrain aspect. And within this powertrain, we start to see here on this graph, there is multiple different variations. We have gasoline, we have diesel, we have hybrid. And with mixing in that regulation aspect we talked about in the last slide, we see what is the industry going to do is the next big question. So with this, we've developed a roadmap of technologies across the sector in automotive. So we look at gasoline, diesel, transmission side, and also the electrification. And this graph shows in light blue the current focus of the industry. And the darker blue in the middle signifies what's the next generation of focus. So between now and 2025, what are OEMs going to be looking at introducing? What do the tier ones and the supplier ecosystem have to be developing and manufacturing for the next wave of vehicles? And then the dark blue on the far right-hand side is what post-2025 will the industry shift towards in terms of these individual areas and technologies. And you can see from this slide there's lots of information and lots of acronyms and points of change. But the one thing I wanted to show with this is the big challenge the industry is facing is the complexity of this roadmap shows the complexity of the industry and their challenge. And what this means is the OEMs will start looking more holistically and start comparing, if I have to introduce a technology for the US and its gasoline, how do I do that when I also have a European market that's been more stringent? How do I view this in mix with electrification? So instead of just having an evolutionary advancement of their combustion engines or their combustion technology, they may go for a big revolutionary change and shift towards electrification. So the industry is now looking full across this roadmap instead of just focusing on one individual aspect. And what we see with this roadmap is there's three key topics of focus. So if we group that last roadmap and say, okay, where's the big changing points? Then we focus in on three areas. Advanced ICE, so advanced predominantly gasoline engine. So big growth in direct injection gasoline technology as well as implementation. We'll start to see introduction of electric boosting and variable compression ratio. And we'll start to see, obviously, direct injection is very common in Europe and is starting to enter the market into China, India, and the US. But we'll see in the next year and towards 2020 a huge boom in the global growth of this model of direct injection. With electric boosting, where there is a couple of OEMs who have this on the market today, but we'll start to see more mainstream products come out with an electric boosting. And variable compression ratio was first launched in the US last year by Nissan, but we'll see them expand that through the rest of the globe in this coming year. So we see this technology we're viewing on the roadmap as next generation is starting to filter through with the OEMs in the coming year. The big hot topic of electrification, and obviously with electrification we view this predominantly as EV, or we see the halo aspect of this as EV, which Anjan will discuss. But for me, there is a lot of spectrum between where we are currently in combustion engine and the EV side. So we talk about mild hybrid having a huge growth in European markets, so 48 volt or 12+12 technologies. We see many OEMs now starting to join Toyota on launching lots of full hybrids. And then we have the premium OEMs with their larger vehicles focusing on plug-in hybrids. We have the announcements for Geneva starting to filter through, with Audi launching 4 new plug-in hybrid models to launch this year. So we start to see in our outlook for 2019-2020 a huge growth in the premium segment for plug-in hybrid. Another area that's very interesting is transmissions, particularly as the European market becomes more automatic in terms of customers viewing automatic transmissions as highly enticing. But new technologies enter in the US market and other markets where automatic is very strong, such as higher ratio speeds, the use of dual clutch transmission, automatic transmissions, and also the growth of a new technology in dedicated hybrid transmissions. So this is transmissions that come integrated with a hybrid system. So starting to see this shift towards even the electrification coming into the transmission and not just the ICE. And with all this, my focus here is just to show what the industry is doing and how it is changing and the influencing it's starting to have on the strategies the OEMs have to take and the strategies the supplier base has to take within that. And we use this data and we funnel down another layer within our outlooks, within our powertrain outlook and other outlooks in terms of the EV ones. We look at how are OEMs going to achieve this and which strategies is each OEM going to conduct. So this graph here shows on the left-hand side the complexity of their current combustion engines and their mild hybrid engines. So this is how complicated or how invested is that OEM in their maintaining the status quo. Whereas the horizontal axis is more about where do we see their future proposition within the very highly electrified platforms of full hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and EV. So an OEM such as Toyota, who is very famous for having strong hybrid technology, strong hybrid market share, but very simplistic combustion engine, will be in the bottom right-hand corner. And a company who's less susceptible or less interested in electrification, such as Mazda, more focused on the top left-hand corner. And the most interesting thing for me is those are the outliers. Those are the easy ones to conduct their strategy, to understand what they're doing as a business and why they're doing it. The bits in between where we have these mainstream OEMs in the bottom left-hand quadrant, the premium in the top, and some companies like Nissan and Volvo, that's really where the interesting aspects come. These OEMs are not going with one simple strategy. They're starting to mix up between electrification and advanced combustion engine, because the one thing that you can see with the complexity of the roadmap, the complexity of the challenges and the globalization of it all, is there is no silver bullet technology. There is no one technology for every OEM to utilize going forward. So we have in the premium segment here on this graph, the premium segment focusing on 48 volt, focusing on Miller cycle and advanced expensive boosting systems to maintain their performance. The mainstream OEMs, however, are looking still within trying to eke out as much as they can from their current engines, variable valve timing, direct injection turbo. And then we have some companies like Volvo who are very heavily invested in electrification and becoming an electrification leader. So within our outlook, you can start to see some of this information, and we track this on an annual basis to show where we see the OEMs going. So to finally come as a conclusion to what I want to discuss today on our powertrain outlook is some of the key predictions. So our outlook is not just viewing the current year and what's happening, but as I said, it's a roadmap and showing how we're going to go forward in 2019. So one of the aspects is for North America particularly, and eking into Europe, diesel still will have a bad year. And we have obviously all that long-term understanding of why going back to Dieselgate. But then we also have a strong prediction in EVs. As I mentioned on our powertrain outlook earlier on, there's a bit of a strong growth in EV. But also we start coming down into the platform basis, which Anjan I think will go into a little bit of detail later on. But OEMs are now, because they see the horizon being very focused on EV and high electrification, when they're starting to launch their new models, we predict this year we will start to see the introduction of new models based on new platforms that are capable of taking these OEMs longer term than the current platforms. So the platform basis now, when we try and introduce a plug-in hybrid for an OEM, there's a very difficult challenge and compromise of fitting the battery and the motor into a vehicle that was never designed to have that battery and motor. So we'll see a big shift this year going forward towards 2025, a strong shift in the OEMs to new platforms that will be multi-energy or EV dedicated ones depending on the OEM. We also have here two ones more focused on the powertrain aspect, but The exhaust after treatment side will have a huge shift this year. Due to WLTP testing and RDE requirements, we will see a big adoption of gasoline particulate filters. These gasoline particulate filters will be new to the market, both in terms of for the OEMs, but also for the customer and the supply chain of aftermarket and how to deal with this. So we'll see a big shift this year in the way that gasoline is conducted on its after treatment systems. Also, we'll have the enormous adoption of SCR basically becoming standard on diesel vehicles to reduce NOx and be compliant for NOx regulations. So we'll see big shifts in how customers interact with these and what happens in terms of durability, in terms of ownership, in terms of warranty concerns and things like that. We also see, as I mentioned on the analysis of the OEM strategies, we'll also see some new combustion engines this year. There's not OEMs are not yet finished with what they can do with the combustion engine by itself. So we see Mazda will be launching into a product this year. It's compression ignition engine for gasoline. Nissan, as I mentioned, with their variable compression ratio engine, and BMW also adopting some new technology, including some advanced ignition systems. So we start to see, even though we've got this wave of electrification coming through in the market and coming through in the requirements for legislation, OEMs will still introduce some of these new advanced combustion engines. So that brings me to a close for what I wanted to discuss today. Hope you found it useful, and we're going to have a poll question now, so I'll hand over to Anna to do the poll question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I have pushed forth our first poll question. So if you can take a moment to select your answer, and we will reveal the results in about a minute. So the poll question is, which powertrain do you think will be accepted most by the customer in the future? Is it a mild hybrid, full hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, electric vehicle, or traditional ICE? So we'll give everyone a moment to select their one answer. While you're taking that poll question, I just wanted to remind everyone on the call that under the Attachments tab, we have several links to click on, find out more information about the future of vehicle systems and technologies, our global automotive powertrain research, and our automotive and transportation consulting in the mobility sector. We also have an event coming up in Europe. It's our Intelligent Mobility 2019 event. So this event is it's a forum for attendees to network with peers and other stakeholders and debate the diverse philosophies that underpin mobility as a service, and also examine the potential of new business models and identify revenue opportunities. So you can click on the Intelligent Mobility event to register. And okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll question here and reveal the results. So this is what we have for our results. Now it looks like we have 9% of our audience. It's a split. 9% of our audience indicate, actually, okay, it's 7% now. It just changed. 7% of our audience indicate mild and full hybrid. 53% indicate plug-in, and 33% indicate electric vehicle. So those are the results, thanks to everyone that voted. And I will pass the call over to our next presenter, which is Anjan.
Thank you so much, Anna, for your kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, audience, which based on whichever part of the world you are. My name is Anjan Kumar, and in this section today, we will look at the electric vehicle outlook for this year, as Kevin mentioned, that we do this on an annual basis. And within this section for today, we will look at how the electric cars, in particular plug-in and battery electric cars, have performed in terms of sales since 2007. We'll then take a look at what is the market for the plug-ins and batteries, as well as, hybrid electric cars separately in 2018. What can we expect in 2019? And thereafter, we'll also look at how Frost & Sullivan estimates this total market of electrified cars, which we call it as XEVs, to 2025. And then in the last section, we will also conclude with some of the few handpicked trends which we believe that will impact the future of electric cars in itself. So, the first electric car, the modern generation electric car, was launched back in 2007, which was, I think, the Nissan Leaf and Chevy Volt together, or a year in between. And it took about 8 years for plug-in and battery electric cars put together cumulatively to sell about 1 million of electric cars, which happened sometime in 2015. So it took 8 years for the market to reach this milestone of 1 million electric cars. Today, the global market for electric cars is about 2.1 million or even more. And if I draw the same rationale to how hybrid cars were sold historically, the Toyota Prius, or Toyota was the first vehicle manufacturer to launch a hybrid car back in 1996, 1997 in Japan and then in the US, and it took 15 years for the hybrid industry to reach this milestone of 1 million hybrid vehicles cumulative sales globally. But for electric cars, it was 8 years, which means that this tells me that today the vehicle manufacturers are much more confident in launching or having clean and green cars to the end consumers. The end consumers themselves today are much more comfortable in buying clean and green cars. So I would say that the era of electric mobility is already there and is not the future really. So how did these electric cars, plug-in and battery electric cars that I was talking about, perform in 2018, which was 2 months ago, which concluded rather 2 months ago? About 2 million electric cars sold globally, of which about 68.1% were pure battery driven. 31.7% were plug-in cars, which recorded about 57.3% year-on-year growth, and a small bit 0.2% of fuel cell car. Certainly it's not a surprise that China retained its market leadership for the 5th consecutive year, with about 55% of the market share within the EVs in itself. That approximates to about 1.1 million EVs sold in China alone, 75% of which being pure battery driven, 25% are plug-in cars, which recorded about 63.5% year-on-year market growth. Well, if you look at the OEMs in itself, for the first time, Tesla emerged as the market leader, and thanks to the launch of Model 3 and the phenomenal success of Model 3, Tesla sold the highest number of cars globally, constituting to about 11.8% of the total market, and closely followed by BYD, which was the market leader last year. And it would also, bring me interest to BMW, which is slowly catching up in the race. And BMW was one of the first automaker last year to offer inductive charging in their 530e high-performance car, which is one of the first in the market, is what I would say. Looking at the performance of the hybrid cars in itself last year, about 2.38 million of hybrid cars sold, of which only 2.6% were mild hybrids, which would also include the 48 volts. So the 48 volt systems are really small, but about less than 60,000 units sold in 2018, but is a big playing ground in the next 2 or 3 years. Well, what's not surprising is that if you look at the chart for the HEVs that are dominating in Asia, Japan to be specific, about 1.2 million cars are sold in Asia. And in Japan, it's interesting because 1 in 3 cars sold in Japan is a hybrid car. I exclude the mini category over here. And Japan is the only region which is following kind of a pull strategy for clean and green cars or hybrid or electric cars, in other words, which means that in every region or country, it's the government that is pushing clean and green cars to the customers through promotions, through incentives, through subsidies, to benefits and things like that. But in Japan, it's the customer who is more willing to buy an electric car or a hybrid car in this case, whereas in the rest of the world, it's more of the federal, municipal, local governments trying to push this clean and green cars. But what is surprising for me is looking at Europe. In Europe, 2016, about 270,000 hybrid cars were sold. 2017, it notched up to about 430,000, and it fell a bit flat in 2018 to about 441,000, which was kind of a surprise. But nevertheless, the market has really picked up for electric cars, as you saw in the previous slide. And another not so surprising bit, but interesting, is also the top hybrid car producers in the world are Asian manufacturers. The top 5 producers are Asians. Toyota is, of course, a market leader, taking more than 65% of the market share in itself. So we saw what's happened in 2018. So what can we really expect in 2019? I would say that in 2019, we can expect about 3 million or 2.8 million at least electric cars, which means plug-in and battery electric only cars to be sold. And this is about 6 times growth from 2016, which was just 3 years ago. And when it comes to hybrid cars, again, about 3 or 3.5 million hybrid cars to be sold. What's interesting that Kevin also mentioned in his speech was also about the number of plug-in cars or battery electric cars, especially Audi looking at 4 plug-in cars to be launched in 2019. Globally, we would see a minimum of 43 new plug-in or battery electric car launches to be made, and 25 of which at least will be pure battery electric cars. And we see a lot of SUVs and performance vehicles being launched this year. It's also interesting to know that some of the countries like the CEE regions, it could be very small Middle East, it could be Latin America or South Asia, these are the new markets that will pick up for electric cars in the next 2 to 3 years because of the high potential it has through heavy push from the local governments in these countries. But the main conclusion that I will draw for 2019 is that electric vehicles is no more incentive driven. It will be regulation driven or mandate driven from ASEA, it could be, or WLTP and RD, it could be from various diesel bans, so on and so forth. But it will be mandate driven, not incentive driven. Incentives are going to get phased out soon. And also, ICEs or internal combustion engine possibly has already peaked last year, or it's going to peak in 2019, but then from 2020 onwards, it's going to be more of an era of electrification. So a non-electrified engine would really see the downward trend, in our opinion, at least from 2020. So what can we expect further from 2019 towards 2025? Frost & Sullivan adopts a scenario-based methodology in order to arrive at long-term forecasts for electrified cars. It means electrified cars includes a mild hybrid, a full hybrid, a battery, and a plug-in car in itself. So if you are really looking at it, we estimate the market for electrified cars to be between 28 million units to 40 million units by 2025. That would be about 25% of all cars sold or 37% of all cars sold. And of course, they will be really hotspots for these, and we would expect the Western world or the developed world like Europe, a bit of North America for hybrid cars, and of course China for electric vehicles to drive the market in itself. So if you're otherwise looking at what are the key driving factors for such high volumes for electrified cars, of course, one of the key reasons is the climate change the CAFE norms in the US, the ASEA, the Euro norms, as I mentioned a while before in Europe. It could also be banning of certain old diesel or even gasoline cars into the city, which we call it as urban access restriction. But we should also note that the industry is all gearing up or already geared up itself for this massive uptake. We've actually tracked about 14 different trends that will drive the electrified market, but in the best interest of time, we will see about 3 of these important trends, which are quite interesting in my opinion. The first of which is the electrified electric car platforms. Kevin also mentioned about this, but one of the key trendsetters that we see from the vehicle manufacturers side is their EV platform strategy. It's either multi-energy or dedicated EV platform, and in this slide what we see is that the number of electric car platform and also number of models that are built per platform. Today, we see that the average is about 1.5 EV built per platform, basically operating in 2 platforms. One could be a PHEV and other one could be for a BEV, and both of these are platforms shared with other hybrid cars or IC engines, which we call as multi-energy platforms. But in the future, what we will see is that the OEMs leveraging these platforms to build more models per platform in itself. I mean, one of the examples that I can take is PSA Group, which is expected to have high utilizations of platforms, which means that they will have virtually only 2 platforms, but they would underpin as many as 12 models on an average when we look at 2025. So in the next 5 years, what we can see is on an average 5 to 6 models coming out of one platform. On the other hand side, we can also say that when the platforms increase from a standard 2 now to more, yes, of course, there will be one dedicated indigenous platform for electric cars. Volkswagen is doing it. We also anticipate many others to follow the suit. General Motors, Hyundai, say for example, and we will also see many of the other OEMs look at multi-energy platform adoption in itself. But the ones that are looking at dedicated EV platforms will do so looking at more connected, autonomous, shared and electric mobility, which we call it as, or rather popularly known as CASE, which my colleague Mark will conclude in the next section. So this is what we see as one of the key trends driving more and more electric cars to the future. In this slide, we will look at the technology roadmap for electric vehicles. Looking back at 2013, 2014, about 80 to 90 miles was an average autonomy or range for a battery electric car. Thanks to Tesla, who came up, setting a benchmark of 200 plus mile range as a standard, and thereafter the competition really intensified. Today, not just the sports or a premium offering like a Tesla can do about 200, 250 miles, but also volume cars such as the Chevy Bolt, the Nissan Leaf. Today, you can also opt for a 40 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf. The Renault Zoe, say for example, can do about 200, 250 miles, and they all have 40, 60 or 80 kilowatt batteries depending on many factors and what segments, so on and so forth. Well, this has been achievable because of technological improvement in batteries. It could be energy density, it could be power density, it could be innovations in cell materials, it could be innovations in the battery building processes in itself, and in the future, we expect the batteries will get even more bigger thanks to the expected, reduction of battery prices in the future as well. We can also see the autonomy reach 300 miles or go beyond that in the future, and it will be a new standard come 3 or 4 years. So what does it mean? Does it mean that your charging time shouldn't really increase just because your battery size increased? Ideally, by the progression of time, the charging time should reduce, and you can see in this roadmap in the slide. So therefore, one can expect the upgradation of charging infrastructure or the charging station outside the car from today's standard of a 50 kilowatt DC charge station or a 120 kilowatt DC charge station moving up to 200 kilowatts or 350 kilowatts in the future, which means that the power density of the battery on the vehicle side should also increase leaps and bounds. So the kind of chemistry, battery chemistry for the future, the battery type, and also the implementation of advanced cooling systems will become very, very necessary. So the electric vehicle market is undergoing a technological improvement or rationale to the future. The last topic, which would be very interesting, is I spoke a lot about batteries. So what is happening within the battery space in itself? There has been, production capacities installed and, exploration of these. So this chart will give you a good illustration of increasing battery production capacities. In 2016, the production capacities were as small as about 15 gigawatt hour. By 2020, 2021, we will see huge gigafactories being built specifically in China, to be honest. And then, please note that this chart has only illustration of few of battery manufacturers, but then, the market to 2020, which we predict as 110 gigawatt hour in this slide, could be more than that because some of the other players are not really shown. But what's interesting is, Europe can be the next playing ground for batteries. And we see this in the next slide. And one of the key things that draws me to this slide is the amount of interest and investment being made in Europe for sustainable battery supply chain and capacity with capability. The potential demand for the electrified vehicle batteries in Europe alone can go up to about 400 gigawatt hours by 2025. And what you can also see that the number of companies, especially the Asian players such as BYD, LG Chem, Lishan, SK Innovation, and one of the big players, CATL, and also Samsung, one of the popular companies today, are all considering production capacities. 100 billion euros have been announced for investment as of October 2018 in Europe, and the European Commission is poised and expect another 50 billion euros investment to reach the goal of having a domestic lithium-ion battery production supply to meet at least the local EV demand in itself. So we will see more intensified competition, which will also serve as more uptake for electrified vehicles or the batteries. With this, I would like to conclude my section and possibly have another poll question. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Anjan. Yes, I have pushed forth our last poll question, and so again, we'll take a minute for everyone to select their answer and reveal the results immediately. So our poll question is, which in your opinion is the most significant statement that would have a great impact towards 2025? Is it A, BEVs will dominate the market with likely fading away of PEVs? Is it B, mild hybrids? Is it C, relaxation of EPA standards will lead to low EV adoption in the USA? Is it Europe to succeed in establishing a local supply chain for batteries and do not depend on Asia? Or is it Chinese EVs to disrupt sales global market? So thank you to those that have already voted. And for those that have just joined us, our presentation will also be available on demand shortly after we finish, so you can listen to the entire presentation. Also, we have our Intelligent Mobility event coming up in Europe 2019. So on your attachments tab on your screen, there is several different links that you can click on to find out more information regarding our events, and then also our consulting and future of vehicles. Okay, just a few more seconds here. Okay, The results are in. So it looks like we have 30% indicate the Chinese EV to disrupt the sales in the global market, and also split 36% of the BEVs will dominate the market, followed by 16% the relaxation of EPA standards, 8% mild hybrids will likely be standard in Europe, and lastly 4% Europe to succeed in establishing a local supply chain. With that, I would like to now pass the presentation over to Mark.
Great, thank you, Anna. And we've heard a lot about on the electrification side of CASE, and now I'm just going to add a few comments in on the connected, very much touch on lightly on autonomous, and then the shared mobility side of CASE. And with that, I'm going to start with the impact of connectivity. And with connectivity, most EVs to date have been connected basically in order to link the driver to local charging stations and just use that cellular connectivity to keep themselves apprised of where those charging stations are to relieve range anxiety. So that's kind of your base table stakes of into the market of where connectivity can help in the electric vehicle market. And so right now we are looking at the EE architecture of all vehicles, and especially EVs as well. They are moving towards the centralized computing. There's been a long talk in automotive. I've been in the industry for 20 plus years of centralizing computers, because instead of having 75 to 100 plus ECUs in the vehicle, every time you add a feature, you add an ECU, where now a lot of these features are standardized on vehicles. They're moving towards centralized computing and domain controllers with chassis, cockpit, safety with ADAS and autonomous, and then, of course, powertrain. And on the EV side, you're going to be looking at controlling both the motor, the batteries, thermal management of the system, and the power electronics of these systems. And then with the hybrid systems, you have to account for all those systems as well as the internal combustion engine. So tying all those systems together with modular platforms, scalable platforms as well, to move these vehicles when you're adding on more features and adding or taking out features for different regions and different price points. The whole system has to be scalable and built that way from the beginning, designed that way from the beginning. We're also looking at over-the-air updates for service deliveries, as well as updates of the vehicle, cybersecurity patches, as well as feature on demand that I'm going to touch on in a moment. Of course, there's going to be deeper integration with software stacks. Software is becoming more and more important with the vehicle. Software engineering and software hires by OEMs and tier suppliers has risen dramatically and will continue to rise and drive technology in the vehicle in the future. And we're also looking at the actual communication within the vehicle needs to be much faster than the traditional CAN, LIN buses that are traditionally used. So we're going to be moving towards an Ethernet-based backbone to move tremendous amounts of data, especially on the ADAS side, with video data being moved within the vehicle that's very high bandwidth. And then with that, we're going to touch on three areas of personalized, upgradable, and data monetization, where vehicles do need to be personalized in the future, redefining that user experience in the vehicle. It's still very complicated in the vehicle. There's a lot of features and functions for the consumers to use. It can be very, again, confusing and distracting to that driver. Many features that are incorporated into the vehicle actually aren't used by the customer. And OEMs have to kind of have a balancing act of where it's very brand specific, it's brand power. They want to showcase a certain experience for their particular vehicle. But if they go too far, it can take consumers away from what they're used to having their user experience, especially on smartphones, where it's very touch, very visually oriented, and then also working with digital personal assistants. That is very familiar with the consumer, and if the experience is different in the vehicle or too far removed from their experience day to day in the consumer electronic space, and that learning curve is too steep, it can actually be quite negative for that OEM, and many features will not be used in the vehicle. Also moving into upgradable, and that's a pretty interesting area where we can over-the-air software upgrade vehicles, where in the past vehicles were had to be, if they were going to be upgraded at all, it would be a hardware, it would be expensive, brought into the dealership. And now the companies are working on business models to upgrade the vehicle, constantly improve that vehicle after it's been out in the market, and whether that's free upgrades or paid for upgrades. Tesla has pioneered quite a few of those, and that goes right back to that EE architecture I mentioned in the beginning, where you can upgrade all ECUs in the vehicle, or many of them in the vehicle, not just as many OEMs have done on the infotainment side, adding apps and features, where you can actually upgrade powertrain systems, sport chassis systems, offer feature on demand, whether you want one time or per charge for self-parking, per charge for certain ADAS applications. And then you can also add in, as Tesla did a few years ago, where they can, over the air, they can actually unlock range of the vehicle, unlock some unused battery capacity for a charge, of course. And they've also done that in natural disaster events, whether there's a hurricane or not. They can add actual range to the vehicles for consumers to get themselves out of danger. So being able to upgrade the vehicle, over-the-air updates, it can mitigate a lot of recalls are actually software recalls, and instead of bringing your vehicle to the dealership, you can have many of these updates done over the air as well. And we're also moving into data monetization. As we all know, the many sensors on the vehicle are creating a tremendous amount of data from that vehicle. A lot of that data remains within the vehicle, but with connectivity, we can bring that data to the cloud. And many OEMs are working on business models. It's unclear exactly what data they can and can't use. There's privacy issues depending on which country you're in, especially in Europe. A lot of data privacy laws have been passed, so a lot of the data can't be used. Much of the data can be used by the OEM itself to produce better vehicles, but this data also can be used by local municipalities to understand where autonomous vehicles are being used, where they're being charged. Are they being charged at home? Where to build charging stations. It's important to know where these high populations of EVs are and where they're going to be, and also include the grid, make sure that there's enough power in neighborhoods for home charging. Is there enough power to charge these vehicles if even if a new dealership is being built and there's a high number of EVs being brought into that neighborhood? Can the grid support or a parking structure, can that neighborhood support these new numbers of electric vehicles? So just as a final note, the connected vehicle does allow all vehicles, but especially electric vehicles, the ability to upgrade the vehicle through over-the-air updates for recall management, add on features to the vehicle through software, and then, of course, add cybersecurity patches, because once you open up this vehicle to the outside world, you do open it up to hacking, but then with the over-the-air updates, you can add software patches as we move on. For the next slide, I just want to put some color behind it, where we're looking at toward the end of this forecast, around 2025 to 2030, we're looking at 1.6 to 2 billion vehicles. So when we're talking vehicle subscription models, yes, the growth is still quite strong, but we're still looking at a tiny fraction of the overall market. So it's not going to drastically impact vehicle sales in our forecast. But we are looking how awareness has spread quite quickly from basically 2016, when these subscription services were first formed, through 2018. A lot of consumers are aware of them, and then now moving on, as more consumers become aware and more features are added on that I'm going to touch on in a moment, it becomes much more attractive for consumers to look at these subscription services. In the current subscription services, where it's current, like 2017 and into 2019, we're looking at your traditional insurance, maintenance, vehicle delivery, registration. If the vehicle is brand new, you can buy a subscription service to this vehicle. Yes, it is a premium service, but you do get all those features included in that subscription. And what we're looking for from 2019 through 2025 is adding on quite a few more features that can also be enhanced, whether it's through connectivity and especially within the EV. So a major differentiator for vehicle subscription in the future could be refueling, recharging that vehicle take away the range anxiety, potential opportunity for utility companies and charging infrastructure providers to participate, to add in as part of their subscription, to become partners with OEMs and private companies offering these subscriptions, to give EV owners the ability to draw them to their charging stations rather than others as part of this subscription plan. So again, this concierge type of service would become standard name in the industry, being expected and offered by most of the providers as these subscription services, where you can are growing quite quickly, and they offer things that aren't offered from your traditional buying or leasing activities. And if we look at the chart, we actually are growing from thousands of units in 2016 to over 11 million subscription services being purchased in 2024, and then up to 16 million in 2025. So we do foresee quite strong growth, but again, when you're talking about 2 billion vehicles on the road and hundreds of millions of 100 million vehicles being sold, is not going to put a huge dent in overall. So we also do see the initial offering of these subscription services tend to be for larger vehicles and luxury vehicles such as Volvos and Cadillac, and the subscription model fits very well in with the luxury EV market as well, where the luxury EVs, the longer range EVs, as the battery packs and battery costs are still quite high, tend to be put into a higher cost luxury vehicle. And these subscription services can add to that luxury concierge experience, where you can add in tolling charges, congestion fees, free parking, navigation experience to get your vehicle to that recharging, refueling station, that full concierge. All fees are included in that one-time subscription. Then we're moving to the new mobility solutions, and we're actually forecasting that all total they're going to be worth $2 trillion by 2030. And how does that impact electric vehicles overall? So we're looking at the world continuing to urbanize, and we're looking at sustainable ways to manage that urban growth. Cities are becoming smarter, moving towards alternative modes of transport, as in car sharing, ride sharing, dynamic rapid transport. So that's basically bus systems, shuttle systems that are dynamic, not on set routes, but go towards consumers that they can more or less hail these vehicles and change their routes to bring these bus systems to where the actual population is. There's also carpooling as well, so to encourage people to give up ownership of cars. And we also have on the chart is taxi services, and that's both traditional taxi services and the e-hailing of the Uber and Lyfts of the world as well. And that's where we see two markets that we see to expect aggressive growth would be that ride-hailing taxi service, and then the dynamic shuttles or dynamic rapid transit. And they're also ripe for the adoption of electrified powertrains, as these vehicles tend to have much more usage than your traditional internal combustion engine. People commuting to work where the vehicles are parked by far, 80, 90, 95% of the time those vehicles are parked, where these vehicles that are used quite a bit more, whether it's the shuttle or the taxi services, would be used with especially in the battery electric vehicles due to their low operating costs. And as we move forward in the future, as Anjan was mentioning, battery costs are coming down. The total cost of ownership and cost per mile of these vehicles will come down in the future, and that will bring more profitability to these taxi services and shuttle services, where there's some profitability issues in some of the business models as they stand right now. But in the future, if the operating costs and cost per mile or kilometer are lower, these business models can make a little bit more sense. And many times, these services are offered in city environments, especially the dynamic shuttles or dynamic rapid transit are offered in city environments that have quite strong legislation that tends to favor EV adoption in order to limit vehicle emissions. And as you see on the right-hand side, especially in the bottom right, where we're seeing by 2030, autonomous vehicles will be 15% of the dynamic shuttle market and only 2% of the taxi services. And that, again, is to reduce the costs of these services where the driver themselves, paying the driver, is quite expensive. So the combination of autonomous vehicles without a driver and also being electrified with lower cost operating costs per mile can really make these services grow quite quickly as the cost per mile of offering these services goes down, profitability can go up, but also the cost for these rides for the user can go down quite dramatically, again, causing more consumer adoption of these services. So the long-term disruption of this mobility industry is likely to arise when these fleets vehicles are present in large volumes on our roads, and the first wave of communication is expected to hit the demand-responsive shuttle industry first, and then followed by the ride-hailing industry. So that's how we see that market maturing and growing, and we do see very strong adoption of EVs in this market, especially when the price point, the battery price point, brings down the initial cost of the vehicle, but then the total cost of ownership and total cost of usership comes down much far below that of IC vehicles. And with that, I'll hand it back.
Thank you so much, Mark. So at this time, we're going to go straight into our question and answer session. So we'll try to answer as many questions possible live. If for some reason we don't get to your question, the team will get back with you. So let's go ahead and start off with our first question. Which XEV does your trend slide 17, include? Is it BEV and PHEV and MHEV and FHEV and FCEV? So quickly, we're just going to forward to slide 17.
Yeah, Anjan here. So thanks, Anna. I think this is slide 17, where the question was asked for. Yes, this includes all the types of electrified vehicles, which is MHEV, FHEV, PHEV, BEV, and FCEV, to clarify. Yes, it includes all 5 types.
Thank you, Anjan. Now, this question is for Kevin. Kevin, will diesel continue to decline?
Yeah, so I think with diesel within the passenger car, I think it will continue to decline quite strongly. I think diesel going forward now within the passenger car market will be predominantly a vehicle-dependent case. So I see diesel still having an opportunity in D segment and above, so large executive saloons and SUVs from the premium OEMs, but I think the mainstream OEMs by 2025 will start to phase out diesel in favour of gasoline and mild hybridization of gasoline. So I think predominantly from the mainstream OEMs, I think we've seen the last of diesel in the large volume segments.
And to conclude, in addition to that part of that question, do you think these trends relate to the commercial vehicle market? How do you think these trends relate?
So I think with the commercial vehicle market, the trends are massively different, and they're such a different set of trends and use cases and dependencies that actually at Frost we operate another function with commercial vehicle teams. So we have a separate commercial vehicle team, and myself and Anjan work with the commercial vehicle team on understanding their challenges, what's happening with their customers, because their use cases are highly variable, and an OEM could have a one vehicle platform that is made into a dump truck, a logistics transportation, a cement mixer. So how does the powertrain change in each one of those? So we do have a commercial vehicle roadmap, and the trends are very different. Much higher content of diesel and no ability to remove the diesel towards EV like there is in the passenger car market. So the trends are very different, but we do have that capability and data at Frost to do that. So we say diesel's much more prominent in that commercial vehicle space and will be for the longer term.
Thank you, Kevin. This next question is for Mark. So, Mark, we've heard about the advantages of the connected car and over-the-air updates. What are the drawbacks?
Sure. No, that's a very good question. The main drawback of the connected car, I touched on it very briefly, but once you open up any device or any, especially the vehicle, to the cellular networks, you are ripe for hacking and you are a target for hacking. We've seen, luckily for the most part, white hat hackers that are looking to kind of educate and show the industry that these vehicles can be hacked and are actually helping the industry prevent vehicles from being hacked. But they can be a target. Luckily, vehicles so far have been not so much of a target from black hat hackers, as it's not easy to do. It's and for a hacker, they want to hit as many basically as many units as they possibly can, and there's many more smartphones and computers in the world than there are vehicles. So luckily, the small numbers of automotive have actually helped for hacking. But I foresee in the future where potential black hat hacker could hold companies hostage and demand payment. For example, if you try to shut down the latest generation of all OnStar vehicles, and you can threaten that or cause some harm, is quite a bit of a danger. But the good news is that with that connectivity, I did touch on that most, all OEMs are both internally and are also working with external cybersecurity companies, building their electronic and electrical architectures from the chip level up with security and cybersecurity and upgradability and patching from the beginning. So it's the old systems are being replaced by new systems that have security built in from the chip level through the module level and then system level. So that they're all upgradable. Security patches can be added, and hopefully that would be enough to prevent cybersecurity hacks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. Now, this question here is for Anjan. Anjan, what, according to you, will be the price of batteries by 2025 and 2030?
Okay, thank you, Anna. I think this is one of the most common questions that's often asked. Well, yeah, I think it's quite difficult rather to pinpoint on one price and say that this will be the price of the batteries. Rather, today in the open market, the price of the battery depends on a lot of things. It's mostly the supply terms in itself, and what kind of a car it is, a plug-in or a battery electric car, and the supply term is for for a certain volume, or is it timeline, so on and so forth. So having said that, in the open market it's about $130 to $210 per kilowatt hour as of now, and then we expect this to reduce quite significantly at least until 2022, 2023, and I believe by 2025 it should be about 100 or even lesser than 100, and by 2030, if one could really say that it would be about $80 per kilowatt hour, and going below 80 or even $70 per kilowatt hour would be very, very difficult unless and until there is a breakthrough in the cell manufacturing technology or the chemistry in itself. And one of the chemistries that has a strong potential over here is the solid state chemistries, and if that is, which is still in the laboratory, and if successful, the battery prices can, of course, possibly still go below 70, because these are like chips, and then the thermal management becomes very easy, which means less cost, and even the ease of manufacturing, if succeeded, would be quite easy, and then they could be manufactured in bulk, like how the ICs are manufactured as of today. So I think that would be the price of the cells rather than the batteries of the lithium-ion cell. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have another question here. What can OEMs do to educate the consumers concerning vehicle subscription services? And that's for Mark.
Oh, yeah, that's another good one. Right now it's a very new market, and actually the OEMs are still working on their business model to make sure that these subscription services are actually profitable. But yeah, it's your traditional marketing and advertising, and actually when a consumer comes in to purchase that vehicle, to educate them on the outright purchase, leasing, or the subscription model, the benefits of what that subscription model can entail, how long would the subscription last? Is it a year? Is it 2? Can you swap vehicles with this model? And again, I think the big issues are, what do you get with the subscription above and beyond a traditional buying or leasing? Yes, there's maintenance and there's other things that are added in, but a lot of those are added in, and on a new vehicle, there's not a whole lot of maintenance in the first few years. Something needs to be added to these subscriptions to make them a little more intriguing for that consumer to buy these subscriptions. So that's why getting free charging or priority charging at stations, priority parking, reduced tolls or including tolling, make that driver's life easier, make it a premium concierge type experience is the way it should be handled.
Thank you so much, Mark. So at this time, we're going to conclude today's session. Again, please contact us with any additional questions or feedback. I've posted the details for Kevin, Anjan, and Mark on your screen at this time. And then just remember any of the questions that we did not get to address today. Anjan and the team will get back with you. Thank you again for your time.